Hello, this is Hilary Robertson. In this episode of Harmonious World, I'm talking to Daniil Trifonov, Russian pianist, whose album Silver Age is out now. Silver Age features music by Scriabin, Stravinsky and Prokofiev, and it includes the second piano concerto and solo works by Prokofiev, Stravinsky's Petrushka and Firebird, and Scriabin's piano concerto in F-sharp minor. The Silver Age period of art and music in Russian history is not a simple one to describe, but when you hear it, I think you know what these composers were working with. Rachmaninoff and Scriabin represented the younger generation of Russian composers at the turn of the 20th century and at a time when Russia was going through immense change. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Daniil. Firstly, can I just thank you for joining me on this call? It's a great pleasure to interview you, Daniil.
Thank you.
So I've been listening to Silver Age, which is an absolutely stunning album. Can you tell me how it came about? So obviously you've been artist in residence with the New York Phil, and did it come about because of that, or did it happen before that? When did you decide? When did the idea for this album germinate?
Well, actually, I was first discussing with a friend of mine something about music or something about arts, and then eventually he mentioned to me Silver Age, and I was quite surprised because this term is usually not very well known outside of Russia. It's usually primarily used in Russia to describe that period of art in late 19th, early 20th century. But then he mentioned it to me. And I thought that's actually surprising that I was surprised that he knew about it, but I knew that it is not commonly known in general. So I thought, why don't I actually build something, a project around that time period that would bring a little bit more awareness to this period in Russian history, because it was quite different from anything else that was done in Russia before that. Before that, in early 19th century, there was more focus on more national traditional foundation for the arts, and later there was much more experimentation during the Silver Age. They already went beyond that national foundation, and they wanted to expand further. And everybody worked in different directions and in different styles. There was at the same time a very active scene in symbolism, in futurism, in cubism, in impressionism, in paintings, for example. And then in literature also, they were using Russian language in quite different ways. And they're trying to actually advance it and using unusual combinations, and something that would maybe sound a little bit even strange, but it at the same time made sense. And yeah, they worked on basically modernizing Russian language as well. Also in music, they wanted to experiment, and the composers on the album, Scriabin, Prokofiev, Stravinsky, they probably were the ones who were the most pioneering in their ways. Scriabin with his atonality later in his life. Unfortunately, we were not able to record everything because of a pandemic. I was actually planning to record some of the late Scriabin for the album, but it was supposed to be done in June, and in June everything was closed. So, but we just recorded it last December, so there will be more tracks added in the future to the project. Yeah, but for now I just have his earlier work, the concerto.
Right, but that's just a beautiful concerto, isn't it? I think that's my favorite piece, actually.
It's a great piece. It's despite being early work, it's actually, I would say, it's one of his last works of his early period. Already there one can see shifts, his future shifts in terms of style, of his evolution of his style. It's quite difficult to rehearse, and it takes a long time. It's very it involves every instrument of the orchestra in almost soloistical manner, and both the orchestra and the conductor need to know the score. And actually, Valery Gergiev, who is conducting on the album, he played that concerto in his youth. Before he started conducting, he played it on tours in Soviet Union as a pianist. So he knows the score really well.
Ah, right. Okay, maybe that's why. It really is. I think especially the third movement, the Allegro Moderato, that's just beautiful.
Thanks.
So the Silver Age as a term is something that's new to me. Do you think there's something about it being at such a tempestuous moment in Russian history that made all of this happen and come together at the same time?
Well, yes, there was a search for a new language, and then there was a lot of political tension as well that in the end ended up in a Bolshevik revolution, which at the same time effectively ended the Silver Age because a lot of those artists had to immigrate from the country. And but back then it was both St. Petersburg and Moscow were very active in terms of a cultural scene. And actually, a person who had a vision to bring it all together was Diaghilev with his Ballets Russes. He knew all of those composers. Also, he knew Rachmaninoff, who was a little bit more in a traditional vein, but he still wanted to popularize his music as well. But one of his goals was to bring awareness of Russian culture in the West, and he wanted to do it not only through the means of more traditional art from 19th century, but he wanted composers and dancers and the painters to create something completely new. And so in many ways, Diaghilev was one of the engines behind that whole process.
And of course, this follows on from your own Rachmaninoff project, which is those two albums, The Departure and Arrival.
Yeah, well, Diaghilev was also making sure that Rachmaninoff music was played as well, but his primary interest was for a more modernist composers, which back then it was already late Scriabin, just emerging Stravinsky. He just finished his studies with Rimsky-Korsakov in St. Petersburg, and a little bit later Prokofiev, also from St. Petersburg.
Can you talk to me a little bit about your background? Because you studied music first in Moscow and then you moved to America. Can you tell me a little bit about studying in Moscow and what that was like, and then the move to America?
Well, I initially started in Nizhny Novgorod, which is a city to the east from Moscow. When I was 8, I began my studies in Moscow, and I finished the Gnesin school there when I was 18. And then I wanted to study in the United States, and my teacher in Gnesin school, Tatiana Zelikman, recommended me to study with Sergei Babayan, who is teaching in Cleveland Institute of Music. So that's the reason I went there. I had concerts, mainly in Europe, in Italy. Before that, actually, I started traveling by myself when I was already 13, and so for me, it was not unusual to find myself by myself in a new place, but it was maybe unusual to spend so much time in a new place, and so maybe the first year it was a little bit difficult in certain ways, but then already the second year was much easier, and then I got used to it.
Okay. I'm very conscious that I don't have a huge amount of time with you, so I want to kind of rush through things a little bit. I'm interested in your live streaming that you've been doing during lockdown.
Well, it's impossible to completely not play. This is it's not only live streaming, but I did some concerts as well to Taiwan, and there were some European festivals in the summer. There was even a concert here in the United States in Florida last December with a limited audience, of course, but in some ways the arts still needs to continue to be happening. Yeah, of course, now there are a lot of challenges, and well, hopefully, relatively soon it can be much more normal.
Yes.
But yeah, I wouldn't. I don't know what I would have been doing if I wasn't performing.
Okay. And do you have plans already for concerts or tours or anything like that? Has anything
been
put into place yet?
Well, there are still some concerts happening. I just came back from Germany. Well, Germany now is in a lockdown, but they still do online streams. So, and I also did my next recording for Deutsche Grammophon. And among next concert, of course, it depends from country to country. It depends on the situation. The nearest is Spain. I have a concert in Madrid later this month. And then in March, there are for now planned chamber music concerts with Gotia Capuzon. Also some concerts, some orchestral concerts and solo recitals as well.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I hope that you can come to London. And for me, I would love to hear the Scriabin, in its entirety in a concert.
Yeah, I never played Scriabin concerto in London.
All right. Okay. Well, we should get that booked in.
Hopefully.
Fantastic. Well, we're rapidly running out of time, so I just want to say thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you can continue. And it's great to hear that you've been doing some performing, because I know that's the hardest thing for a performer, is to stop. And I know that for some people it's had to be a complete stop. So, and I look forward to hearing you at some point in the future live.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniil. Well, thank you to Daniil for joining me on that episode of Harmonious World, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. It was fascinating. Please do subscribe to Harmonious World wherever you got your podcast. I have some amazing guests lined up for the next few weeks, so I hope you enjoy listening to Harmonious World. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.